Okay, looks like we're connected. We'll be starting in less than a minute. And people still checking in. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so we're continuing with a series on the Four Noble Truths, and we're into the fourth truth, the truth of the path. We're coming down to the last couple of factors. Today we're dealing with Samma Sati, right mindfulness, which is the seventh of the path factors. It's one that's obviously associated particularly with bhavana, or mental development, meditation. Let's clarify what is meant by sati, because I think that often people have the wrong idea from the English overuse of the word mindfulness these days. That sati has a very particular meaning. Um, it's often simplistically said it means being in the present moment. And there's some truth to that. That's not entirely wrong, but it's a little bit misleading because part of sati is related to memory. The Sanskrit word that's the equivalent, smriti, is used directly to mean memory. And we find in the Pali texts, there's a phrase that's repeated sometimes when some individual is being praised for being mindful. It says so and so is satimant, meaning possessed of sati. So and so is satimant. He easily recalls that which was said and done long ago. Uh, also, there's a traditional test that teachers will give to students to see if they're mindful, if they have sati. And there's versions of this in both the Thai forest tradition and in Zen that I've seen. The student goes to see the teacher, and the teacher will ask him, on which side of the door did you leave your sandals? To see if he was being mindful when he took his sandals off before entering the room. So this is also a somewhat a faculty of memory. Another connection to memory would be found in the Abhidhamma. The in the Chittavritti, the sequence of mind states that this in English is often called the cognitive series, the series of mind states that occur when we process information coming in. This is a series of it varies with circumstances, but it's often 14 mind moments, and that at the towards the end of the series, there's a particular consciousness that's called tadaramana, which is translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi as registration consciousness. The literal breakdown of the word would be putting something in its place, and it's only occurs when the mind moment is clear. So when you're mindful, when you're fully mindful, it goes through a full sequence. if you're not fully mindful, it aborts before that point on hard disk. It's saved. So you're putting it away, you're registering it. So one small kind of practical application of this is if you find yourself always losing your keys or your pen or something, that the trick is when you put it down to be mindful at the moment when you're putting it down, so that then your consciousness registers it, and then later it's easily remembered. So it does have this, sati does have this connection with memory, but that's not the whole story. It does mean that you're fully present in the present moment. There is a older translation, some of the older English translations of the Buddhist scriptures use the word recollectedness for sati, which I think is quite good, probably better really than mindfulness. And you could define it as remembering to be present. You're in the present moment, you're fully in the present moment because you remember to be so. You know who you are, where you are, what you're doing. And you're fully present, fully conscious. And then you're able, if this is continuous, then your memory will be good because you keep registering your experiences. So developing sati is a critical component of mental development. In the formula for the Noble Eightfold Path, the definition given for sati references the four satipatthana. There's a sutta in the Digha Nikaya, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, that is often considered to be the kind of foundational text for insight meditation, where the Buddha talks about directing mindfulness towards these four bases or foundations: the body, feelings, vedana, mental states, citta, and mental contents, sankharas. So being aware of body and mind. And the sutta breaks down various practices for each of these. The sutta itself is it covers a lot of ground, but so it's not a short sutta, but the language is very condensed. It's very concise, and this leaves a lot of room for interpretation. And there have been more than one, several books written explaining the Satipatthana Sutta. It is capable of different interpretations because of its conciseness and brevity in the instructions. It's possible that the Mahasatipatthana Sutta in the form that we have it today is not a verbatim record of the Buddha's speech, but it's a summary. It's my idea, my suspicion, that it represents, at some point, the Buddha gave an extended course in meditation to a group of monks. And what we have in the Satipatthana Sutta is basically the chapter headings, the syllabus, or somebody's lecture notes, a very brief summary of what was probably a much more extensive teaching. Now, when the longest section in this sutta deals with mindfulness directed towards the body, and there are several different ways that are spoken of doing it. One is through the breath, mindfulness of breathing. Another is to direct the mind to the postures. One's aware of standing, sitting, lying down, walking, it would go beyond that to being aware of the body in the sense of where your limbs are, and you're conscious of all your movements. Another one is called Sampojanya, which is usually translated clear comprehension. And this is general mindfulness in activity. So whatever you're doing, you're walking someplace, you're preparing your meal, you're eating your meal, you're uh, lying down, you're standing up, you're sweeping the floor. Whatever you're doing, you're mindful of your bodily actions. You're clearly aware of what you're doing in terms of action. Then there's meditation on the 32 parts of the body. And a little note here, the original text is found in the Satipatthana Sutta is 31 parts. In the commentary and the Visuddhimagga, it's expanded to 32. The additional part that's added in is the brain. The brain wasn't included in the original 32 or 31 parts. And this is examining the body in terms of the internal organs and the fluids that comprise the body, to develop a kind of neutrality towards the body and seeing it not with the eye of desire. When we see a body and we feel desire, we're only being aware of external signs. We're not aware of intestines and rib bones and pus and blood and all the rest. Attempt to see the body in a new way, develop contemplation of the four elements: earth, air, fire, water, in the body. And the final one is contemplation of corpses, the charnel ground meditation. And this is ideally done with an actual dead body to contemplate, but it can be done purely mentally. And there's a sequence of 9 stages of decay of the body. And if one goes through mentally those 9 stages, it's a progression from the earlier stages are quite frightening and loathsome. The bloated blue body, a body torn apart by crows. But in the end, it becomes more peaceful. There's bones yellowed in the sun, moldering to dust. And in the end, the wind blows the dust away. That's the most extensive part of the sutta, dealing with the body. Contemplation of feelings is simpler. It's just being aware of your feelings, weighed in a pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And this is quite an important practice, to be aware of your feelings. In the dependent origination, the critical point for practice is between feeling and craving, because feeling is the last resultant factor. We don't have control of our feelings. They just arise due to external and internal causes, and we have a reaction as pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. But then the next stage is the beginning of the karma making or volitional cycle, is the arising of craving. We have a craving for pleasant sense experience and a craving to avoid unpleasant sense experience. And that craving starts the whole chain of further stages that lead to birth, sickness, old age, and death. So we're coming into being through craving. And this is pointed out by several teachers. Buddhadasa particularly, Ajahn Buddhadasa made this one of the central points of his teaching, is that watching the dependent origination occurring in real time, and breaking the chain after feeling. And this requires being aware of the feelings. If the feelings occur without mindfulness, it leads to defilement. Uh, Pleasant feeling, if it's not seen mindfully, can lead to craving. Unpleasant feeling to aversion, and neutral feeling to delusion. Then there's Chittanusati, contemplation of the mind. Now, this is kind of a tricky one because actually you cannot be directly aware of the chitta. It's like you cannot see your own face. You can see an image of your face, a reflection or a photograph, but you cannot see directly your own face. So you cannot know chitta, because chitta is that which knows. So contemplation of chitta is defined entirely in terms of states of mind. So the associated um, mode in which chitta arises. And I'll read out the text here. It's pretty short. Here a monk abides contemplating mind as mind. He knows a lustful mind as lustful, a mind free from lust as free from lust, a hating mind as hating mind, a mind free from hate as free from hate, a deluded mind is deluded, an undiluted mind is undiluted, a contracted mind is contracted, a distracted mind is distracted, a developed mind is developed, an undeveloped mind is undeveloped, a surpassed mind is surpassed, an unsurpassed mind as unsurpassed, a concentrated mind as concentrated, an unconcentrated mind is unconcentrated, a liberated mind is liberated, an unliberated mind as unliberated. So these are all to do with the presence or absence of various factors in the mind, whether the mind has defilements or whether it has samadhi. You know, the mind with samadhi, the concentrated mind is the mind with samadhi. And finally, there's contemplation of mind objects, dhammanusati, contemplation of the dhammas, the objects that arise in the mind. And this is in this sutta. It's not given as being a general, undiscriminating awareness of mind states, but is looking for specific categories. The five hindrances, the five aggregates, the six internal and external sense bases, the seven factors of enlightenment, and finally the Four Noble Truths. So seeing those particular factors in the mind. Now, given that it includes the five aggregates and the six sense bases, it would be in general the general contents of mind, because everything that arises will fall into those categories. But the ones that are singled out for uh, are the five hindrances, the nivarana, that is sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, skeptical doubt, and restlessness. On the negative side, and on the positive side, the seven bojjhanga, or factors of enlightenment. Um, that is mindfulness itself is one of the enlightenment factors. Uh, Energy, piti or rapture, tranquility, equanimity, samadhi. Those seven factors of enlightenment. So the positive and negative, the five nivaranas and seven factors of enlightenment, or bojjhanga. So this sutta is the expansion in some more detail of what's mentioned in the sutta that we're basing this series on, the Dhammacakka Sutta, where Buddha gives the Eightfold Path for the first time. And right mindfulness is there defined as what is right mindfulness. Right mindfulness is attention to the four bases, the four satipatthana of body, feeling, mind, and mind contents. So mindfulness, or sati, it comes up in at least two places in two of the lists of factors, that the 5 faculties and the 7 enlightenment factors. And in each case, it serves as the pivot point. In the 7 bojjhanga, 7 enlightenment factors, 3 are considered calming factors, and 3 are considered energizing factors. And in the sutta where the Buddha gave this teaching for the first time, he used the analogy of keeping a fire going in a steady fire. If the fire is getting too hot and blazing out of control, you don't throw in dry twigs and bark and paper. You throw on wet grass and wet leaves. You damp it down. If the fire is going out, you don't throw on the wet grass. You throw on dry twigs and so on, and get it blazing up again. So you use the calming factors and the energizing factors to balance your state of mind. And sati is in the middle. There's always a need for sati. The Sudimagga says that sati here is like salt in cooking. Salt is always required. That may be some debate about that from a culinary point of view, but I don't think Buddhaghosa was necessarily a cordon bleu chef. But his point is that there's never such thing as too much sati. Sati is always needed in the immediate practice, in the immediate moment. And it serves a similar role in the 5 faculties. It balances the 2 pairs. The 2 pairs are the pair of energy and concentration, virya and samadhi. And again, this is energizing and calming. And the 2 factors of faith and investigative wisdom. Sati acts in these lists as a kind of a self-diagnosis. You need mindfulness to be able to determine your state of mind and see where you are, and you determine, I'm too restless. I'm over-energized. I need to work on the calming factors. Or I'm too dull and sleepy. I need to work on the energizing factors. And sati is the quality that determines that. Having said that there's no such thing as too much sati, there is a kind of caveat to that. There is another kind of distinction that's made between sati and sampojanya, that's sometimes made, that there are 2 aspects of mindfulness, sati and sampojanya. We saw in the list on contemplating the body that sampajanya there is used for general awareness in activity. Sati, as contrasted to sampajanya, sati is more momentary and intense. It's a clear awareness of present moment situation, whereas sampajanya is a more broad general awareness. There's a story that I heard about Ajahn Chah to illustrate sati and sampajanya. It's said that at one time he was visited by a monk who was senior to him, and all the monks were impressed by this senior monk because he seemed to be so composed and perfect in his demeanor and posture and gestures and so on. Seemed to be very mindful. And then they went out on the daily alms round, and the way it works is that you walk in order of seniority. So the senior monk's in front, and Ajahn Chah was behind him, and this monk walked with perfect form, one foot in front of the other, flawlessly, until they came to a corner. And instead of going around the corner, he kept walking forwards, and he ended up walking uh, into someone's yard, into a pile of cow dung. And this is given as an illustration of lack of sampajanya. He was too narrowly focused with his mindfulness. So a full, complete sati would include sampajanya. It's awareness of context as well as a narrow focus on the present object. But there is a place for this narrow focus. This is when we do vipassana meditation. We're attempting to be clearly aware of the present moment object with great focus and intensity. But this is a particular development. Uh, Generally, you want this broader sati that includes sampajanya, and that would include tadaramana, and would include the registration consciousness. So that a good and again, a good test to see how mindful someone is how well they remember small details. So this is the seventh path factor. We have one more to go, and I'll stop with my formal remarks and turn to the chat and see what questions I can deal with here. And I see there's already some up there. Let's kind of scroll back and see if I can find where it starts. Okay. You said, this is a first one I'll deal with. You said in older video that sati is lacking from Eightfold Path in jhanas, and why we don't achieve enlightenment in jhanas. But why is the fourth jhana called purity of mindfulness? You said eternalism usually involves a creator God and denies causality, but what about cases like Jainism that are atheistic but believe in eternal soul and cosmos? Okay, there's two separate questions from the same poster. Deal with the first one. It is the general theory as found in uh, the Surimaga and the Abhidhamma and so on, that there is no enlightenment in jhana, because it's impossible to be clearly have that clear awareness. The mind is too focused on the object. But there's also no enlightenment without jhana. Jhana is an important prerequisite for enlightenment. The purity of mindfulness in fourth jhana is the purity of the whole of the object, with the breath or the kasina, whatever it might be. You said the next one was about eternalism and the creator God. What about cases like Jainism that are atheistic but believe in eternal soul and cosmos? Yeah, there are variations. We see in the Digha Nikaya, the Brahmajala Sutta, which deals with 61 wrong views, and they fall into the categories of eternalism or annihilationism. And eternalism usually involves a creator God, but not necessarily. There are variations, and you cite Jainism, that can be atheistic but still believe in an eternal soul. Next question. I read in the Digha Nikaya that the final two paths or factors at the Eightfold Path, Samanyana and Samawamuti. Would you be including these two in coming talks? I hadn't planned to. Uh, Samanyana is right knowledge, and Samawamuti, right liberation. This refers to the culmination of the path, when one has attained to uh, they has completed the Eightfold Path in perfection. Then the two stages are succeeding that, or the unfoldment into Nibbana, Samanyana, complete knowledge or knowing, and then Vimutti, liberation. So there are a couple of places in the suttas where uh, the path is given as 10 factors rather than 8, including these two, but they're really like after the path is completed, additional factors. Is it important to gain full insight on the arising and cessation of 5 aggregates to realize Nibbana, or just letting go of the 5 aggregates would be sufficient to realize Nibbana? Um, to realize Nibbana, it's done through seeing the 3 characteristics: the emptiness, impermanence, and imperfection or dukkha. And actually, at the end, it's only one of these 3. It could be any one of the 3 is seen clearly and in depth. Uh, then one can escape from samsara, and then these 3 characteristics become the 3 gateways. Uh, One who attains on the factor of dukkha is said to be a body witness, because dukkha is more evident in the body, and usually that's the aggregate that's fully understood or penetrated with the knowledge of dukkha. One who understands fully impermanence has the signless liberation, animata. Animata is the object in meditation that we focus on. And there's a kind of illusion of permanence in jhana meditation, because you're looking at an object that becomes very stable, but there's no nimitta in that liberation, or seeing impermanence. There's nothing left to be stable or to be held. And the going through on not self is the void liberation, seeing fully emptiness. Then samsara drops away. Does the Buddha teach about connecting agitation in the mind to tension in parts of the physical body? No, not specifically in that way. Not like specific sites in the body, but the body and mind are seen as connected, and there's tranquility of the body and tranquility of the mind. Restlessness of the body, restlessness of the mind are connected, and they feed onto each other. So a practical way of using this is in the meditation. If you are experiencing restlessness, to make a real effort to keep the body still, even though it feels difficult to do so, maybe painful even. It's still uh, what is required to get through that restlessness and stillness. And the stillness in the body will then influence the mind. And if the mind is very quiet and calm and still, then the body will reflect that as well. Next one. In Buddhism, for a layperson, is watching porn breaking one of the precepts and karmically negative lead to bad results? Uh, I don't think it's technically a breach of the precept, uh, but it's not skillful practice, because it's encouraging lustful mind states. That's indulging in lustful mind states. So it takes one further away from liberation, from freedom. But it's not. It's more a question of practice of bad bhavana than bad sila. It's not really a breach of the precept, because the precepts are ethical. They deal with our relations to other people, external world, and the precept on sexual misconduct is defined as damaging relationships, having sexual relations with someone who's married or engaged or underage. It would be a breach of precept. But that doesn't mean that all other sexual activity is skillful. It can be spiritually harmful without being ethically wrong. Ajahn, you said we cannot know our consciousness, but I heard from a Myanmar teacher, according to Abhidhamma, that the present consciousness can't know itself, but can know past consciousnesses. Yeah, this is kind of a tricky or debatable point. It can have, if it's knowing, if the present consciousness is knowing a past consciousness, it's knowing something that no longer exists. So it's not directly knowing the past consciousness, it's knowing an image or a reflection or a memory of the past consciousness. So it's still not directly knowing consciousness, because a past consciousness is not an existing object. Venerable Bhante, is mindfulness towards the emptiness of the mind or the silence of the mind a good meditation for insight? Yeah, if the mind is silent, then that can be the object of insight. Whatever is present in the mind is the object of insight. And if one is aware of silence, that's probably very good. No, I've lost my place here. Okay, would you explain mindfulness of Dhammas? That's Dhammanusati. And the Dhammas are the objects of consciousness, the mental objects or contents that occur. And these are, in general, anything that arises to consciousness. And the lists given in the text includes the 6 sense bases. So that would include everything that arises in consciousness. But we're also, if we're taking this text as a guide, we're also advised to look for the hindrances and the enlightenment factors, so the negative and positive factors. But all these things are dhammas, they're objects of consciousness. So the chitta is knowing chittasaka. Consciousness knows the object. This is the whole key of this is going on whether you're practicing mindfulness or not. This is what's happening in the mind. Consciousness taking an object. And what you're doing when you try to practice insight is to be aware of that process, to bring it to the full light of conscious awareness, to see object arising, mind knows the object. Would you give advice on using satipatthana to properly address cravings that come to, for example, smoke tobacco or eat sweets? Yeah, you can see the feeling arise first. There'd be a feeling of desire, unpleasant feeling of the lack of the desired substance, and then craving for the substance then arises, and then this is the dependent origination. Being aware of that process is only a first step, and one has to to act on it, not give in to the craving. Hello, Ajahn. Do you have to believe in karma to have right view? I ask this because we cannot observe karma or measure it in a scientific way, not just believing in cause and effect, but karma. Well, karma is particularly mentioned as a component of right view. And when you say it can't be observed in a scientific way, what that really means is it can't be explained in a materialist paradigm. If you get outside of the materialist paradigm, there isn't a problem with it. Karma becomes actually uh, I would say, a logical necessity to explain experience. Uh, uh, Either experiences are utterly random. This is the thing between annihilationism, materialism, and middle path of causality. Our experiences are either totally random or they're imposed on us by external deities. That's eternalism, or they're a result of cause and effect, which would mean karma, that our actions that determine what we experience later. What is the significance of the fact that we cannot see our own chitta if we can see its manifestation states of mind? What else could we see? Well, this is the kind of the closest we can get to seeing the chitta is we can see the coloration of the chitta in the given moment, whether it's uh, agitated or peaceful, whether it's with desire, without desire, and so on. But it's the chitta that's knowing that. The chitta is utterly subjective. It's the pure knowing. So it cannot be an object. It cannot be a subject and an object at the same time. Would it be fair to consider that the state of neither perception or non-perception and the absence of chitasikas would be an aspect of emptiness with sati? Um, well, it is an approach to emptiness. Neither perception or non-perception is this. I like to call it the state of samsara at bare minimum. There's uh, at that point uh, as close to nothing occurring as is possible for one who is still not in nibbana. It's the very minimal state of conditioned existence. Um, so the mind quality of sati, uh, whether it's present there or not, we could say I think it depends somewhat on definition, but I would say it is present. Um, but without clear objects to be aware of, it's not really the same as ordinary sati. Let's see, next one. In Majjhima 52, Ananda says Brahma Viharas can lead to enlightenment, and in Metta Sutta it says practicing properly will make it so you will be reborn. Are these correct readings? I'd have to check that reference in Majjhima. I don't recall Ananda saying that, unless possibly the Buddha corrected him, because the Brahma Viharas on their own cannot lead to enlightenment. And it will tend to lead to a rebirth in the Brahma realms. Did the Buddha ever say anything about nihilism? He did, but it may not be exactly what's meant in the modern word nihilism. He spoke here and there about a false view of natiwada. Nothing exists, the nothing exists view. And this is a kind of another version of annihilationism, or a more extreme version of annihilationism. And the opposite wrong view is atiwada, or everything exists. So there were, philosophers in India who had um, this view that nothing mattered because nothing really existed, and the Buddha was said this is not correct because they don't see the. It comes from not seeing the arising of phenomena, and eternalism comes from not seeing the cessation of phenomena. But if you see both the rising and the ceasing of phenomena, then your tendency is to hold to the middle way. The popular saying, the mind of an enlightened being is nibbana, correct or incorrect? Um, I don't think you can really define nibbana. Trying to put it into a formula like that is never going to quite work. That's actually not bad, but uh, it can't be fully correct because you can't define nibbana in formula like that. Nibbana is described as in Majjhima and Digha. Nibbana is defined as consciousness without end, radiant all around, etc. Does this support Ajahn Mun and other Ajahn view about Chitta, or is Sutta talking about something else? No, I think that is actually one of the best passages describing the enlightened mind. He's not actually describing Nibbana per se, but the mind that knows Nibbana as uh, being radiant, boundless, and without footing or foundation. So this is quite close to the way Ajahn Mun and the forest Ajahns would speak about things. Is Pali Kaya Gata Sati Sutta and Agama parallel of Satipatthana? The four jhanas are included in the Kaya Nupasi chapter. Can Ajahn comment why in Pali Satipatthana jhana is not included? I don't know why it gets put in the Agama. The Satipatthana Sutta is generally considered to deal with insight, and jhana is a separate development, so it's dealt with elsewhere. It's not a topic dealt with in the Satipatthana Sutta. There may be a different meditation tradition that's represented in the Agamas, but I'm not sure why they would have included it. It doesn't seem logical to me that it would be included. Is there a Michi Wumuta since there's a Sami Wumuta? If you include as a Micha under Micha Wimutti, false enlightenment, like one who believes themselves to be liberated, but they're not. I mean, this is something that definitely occurs in the world with people who are mistaken in their own self analysis and honestly believe they're arhants and they actually are not. I think you could call that maybe Michya Samadhi. Okay, where are we here? It's a lot of questions today. In the Atthakavagga, the Buddha is asked what view he holds, and he says he holds no views. How does this mesh with right view in the Eightfold Path? It's speaking, I think, on two different levels. That for the Buddha, Tathagata, he's fully enlightened. He doesn't need to have any view because he perceives complete reality directly. Whereas any being who's not at that stage is viewing things through some lens or another, and we're either perceiving through the lens of right view or wrong view. What is the best way for a layperson to deal with lust and wanting to find a relationship? Um, well, if you're still, if you're a layperson and you're still intending to have relationships, you should try and uh, base them more on loving kindness and metta kindness and generosity, and include sensuality as part of that, but not primarily coming from a point of view of lustful desire. Would you say that learning lucid dreaming is a legitimate way of exploring the mind in order to understand it beside awake meditation? Yes, lucid dreaming is an interesting practice, and it is something worth exploring. One thing you can do if you are in a lucid dream, try doing walking meditation in the dream. Are visions in the domain of eye consciousness, i.e., seeing with the divine eye? Yes, that's included in eye consciousness. Okay, I'm gonna take a couple more questions and then call it. Uh, what do you think of bare awareness practices with regard to the mind, even when one's mind is in a clearly unwholesome state? Is this right effort? Well, it's a lack of right effort. If you're clearly aware of an unwholesome state, then you should make an effort to correct that. Now, mindfulness is only the first step here. You're aware of the unwholesome state, and then you make an effort to diminish it. If a Chakrawadi can live for a length of 16 sakas, then why do commentators have trouble believing he can live for a full Mahakapa? Shouldn't the Buddha's power be superior? Well, there's more than one reason for that. For people who don't follow the question, because it does include some kind of technical stuff. There is one Chakrawati there's a story about him that he actually not only conquered the whole earth, but he was unsatisfied with that, so he conquered the heavens as well, and he ruled in Tawatingsa beside Saka, and he ruled for so long that 16 Sakas came and went while he was ruling beside them. And Chakrawati is a wheel-turning monarch, so he's a Mahaparisa, a great man. And the other type of great man is a Buddha or a Tathagata. And the story in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta is that the Buddha told Ananda, if I chose, I could live for a full kappa. And Ananda didn't reply, so the Buddha did not do so. And the commentators say that the kappa here means a lifespan, not a kappa of the world, but a kappa of a human being, which is linguistically legitimate to read it that way. But one of the arguments is that if the Buddha lived for a full kappa, when Meitya Buddha comes, there'd be two Buddhas present in the world, which is not possible. And it also, if the Buddha extended his life to such a great length, it would mislead people. They would have difficulty grasping the truth of impermanence. Instead, they would see the Buddha living on seemingly forever and seek that for themselves. So there are a couple of arguments made why it could not be the Earth age kappa, but a human lifespan. Okay. I read in your biography that you once read an encyclopedia article as a youth that Buddhism was happiness by not existing. How have your views on that changed since then? I think that's a very naive definition of nibbana. To see nibbana as not existing neither existing nor non-existing, nor both nor neither. The Buddha says outside of those logical categories. But Westerners, uh, especially this was an old encyclopedia, like a 19th century encyclopedia. Uh, Westerners at that time, who were very much coming from a Christian eternalist position, saw Buddhism as being annihilationist. Okay, last question I'll deal with. What about the precept of not taking intoxicants? What about ayahuasca or mushrooms that can lead to profound insights, or soma in the Buddha's time? Well, those substances would be forbidden to bhikkhus under our rules. Um, I think it's kind of a little bit of a gray area for lay people. If the definition of an intoxicant is any substance you take that would make you act in a foolish way. So if substances are taken with an attempt to gain spiritual insight, that's not the same thing as getting drunk and partying. So I think a lot would depend on one's the context in which such things are taken. If they're taken purely for enjoyment, then it would be for sure a breach of the precept. Okay, so I'll stop there. And next week we're doing Sama Samadhi, and that will end the sequence of the Eightfold Path, which is part of the sequence of the Four Noble Truths. So we'll see you again next week.